Hey everyone, a few tickets are still available for the next live taping of the Object Podcast on October 30, featuring special guest Chan Poling, fun quizzes and curator conversation, and storytelling all about the art of the Jazz Age and the 100th anniversary of The Great Gatsby. Tickets are absolutely free. Go to the tickets page on artsmia.org and get your tickets today. Henri Maheu sets sail from London in the spring of 1858. I spare the reader the details of the voyage and of my life on board ship, he writes, and shall merely state that there were annoyances in plenty. The rooms were terrible, he says, and the captain, well, his sobriety was more than doubtful. Maheu is in his early 30s, kind of a naturalist, kind of an explorer. A traveler, really. Okay, a tourist, if you want to be that way about it. He had wrangled a commission for his trip from a couple of scientific societies in France, but they didn't offer money. So when he finally lands in Singapore, some 5 months after setting out, he spends the family fortune traveling through Southeast Asia. First to Thailand, then called Siam. Bangkok, he writes, is the Venice of the East. Whether bent on business or pleasure, you must go by water, lying luxuriously at the bottom of your canoe. He travels along the Mekong River, meeting various tribes, and then by December, he is in Cambodia, which seems to him to be a kind of lesser Thailand. Corruption and barbarity are general in Cambodia, he writes. His servants, he says, have been in a state of alarm ever since they arrived. In the mountains of eastern Cambodia, the servants practically rebel, he says, as they meet what he calls the savages remaining from a race he believes to be extinct. And then he comes out on the plains, in the center of the country, and he's taken, almost by accident it seems, to the city of Angkor. In the temple complex outside the city, called Angkor Wat, he sees enormous stone faces emerging from the jungle. Long colonnades with tall pagoda-like spires, walls carved with scenes of military glory and supernatural splendor, honoring both Hindu and Buddhist deities, and he is overwhelmed. One of these temples, he writes, a rival to that of Solomon, and erected by some ancient Michelangelo, might take an honorable place beside our most beautiful buildings. It is grander than anything left to us by Greece or Rome. He spends 2 years traveling around Cambodia before moving on to Laos. And then, in 1864, a book about his travels comes out in France. Few people in Europe are familiar with Indochina. On some maps, it's referred to only as Beyond India. But when they read Maheu's book, suddenly they're captivated, especially by Angkor. So otherworldly, so other. And Maheu is suddenly famous, celebrated as its rediscoverer, the finder of an incredible lost city. Even though the city, the temples, are not abandoned. Even though Maheu seems to have no idea what he's found exactly. Even though Maheu is dead. This is the Object Podcast, produced by the Minneapolis Institute of Art, now showing Royal Bronzes, Cambodian Art of the Divine, from October 25th through January 18th. The Object is made possible by generous support from Ameriprise Financial, a proud supporter of the Minneapolis Institute of Art, and committed to the future of art and culture in the communities they serve. Ameriprise Financial, helping people feel confident about their financial future since 1894. Today, a story about discovery or rediscovery, and for whom. About known unknowns and unknown unknowns. It's the Lost and Found Department of History. I'm Tim Gihring. Angkor is not lost at all when the first foreigner comes across it. In fact, it's still being built. Xu Daguan, an emissary of the Chinese emperor, is sailing up the coast of Vietnam in 1296. And then, instead of heading toward Indonesia, like Marco Polo, his contemporary, he turns inland, goes up the Mekong River. Eventually, he crosses the Great Lake at the heart of Cambodia and arrives at Angkor. Supposedly, he is in the capital of Cambodia to collect some homage for the Chinese emperor, a tribute to the region's great ruler. But he finds a great ruler already here, the Khmer king. In the late 1200s, the Khmer Empire has been around for some 500 years and is at its peak, covering Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and much of Vietnam. Court officials go around in palanquins, little movable rooms carried on poles, with attendants running alongside with gold parasols. The king has 5 wives, one for each of the 4 directions, and one more because, well, he's the king. Each night, supposedly, for the good of the kingdom, he also has sex with a spirit, a 9-headed serpent conveniently disguised as a beautiful woman. When he leaves the palace, which isn't often, the king carries a golden sword atop an elephant. More often, he stays at home and looks down on his visitors from a golden window. You can do all this, apparently, when you are not just a king, but a god king, which the Khmer rulers have been for centuries. Ever since Jayavarman II climbed a mountain northeast of Angkor and held a Hindu ceremony, declaring himself the Devaraja, the divine ruler. Though they are barbarians, the emissary says of the Khmer, these people nevertheless know what a prince is. Angkor is a walled city, he notes, with a wide moat around it, like a castle. A city full of simple people, he says, who prostrate themselves before him. But the emissary may be the one simplifying things. Angkor in the 1200s might be the largest city in the world, a mega metro sprawling some 390 square miles across the plain. Perhaps 1 million people live here, at a time when only about 350 million people live on the entire planet. Nevertheless, he can't hide his admiration for the bronze statues that seem to be everywhere in the city, in the temples around it, including what he assumes is an enormous reclining bronze Buddha, but is in fact Vishnu, the great Hindu deity who embodies truth and light, goodness. There are so many grand statues, it can be hard to tell what is what, who is who. Though the emissary is right about a different reclining bronze statue he sees in a man-made lake. It is Buddha, resting in part on the great water system of pools and canals that supplies the megacity and the reclining Buddha itself, so that a constant stream of water can flow out of his belly button. After the emissary returns to China, the Khmer kingdom goes on like this for another 150 years, building bigger and better temples, keeping its enemies at bay, mostly, until finally it cracks. Angkor is taken by the Ayutthaya kingdom to the north, in Thailand, and the Thai king rolls around Angkor plundering. He takes some 60,000 families, reportedly, back to Thailand, and he takes hundreds of statues, gold, silver, bronze, not because he finds them beautiful, though they are, but because he finds them powerful, filled with the force of a god king. Take them from the king, and you take the king himself. Well, the actual Khmer king has fled, taking his court and his golden window and his elephants and retreating to the south. The court wanders for hundreds of years, setting up a new capital here and there as the empire shrinks. And then in the 1500s, the king is out hunting for elephants north of the capital, and he comes upon this immense grand city, overgrown by jungle. The king himself has rediscovered Angkor. He reinstalls his court there among the ruins. And this is why, in the Age of Discovery, as European adventurers and missionaries sail around the world, they find what seems like a miracle, a city lost and found, centuries before Moho. An exceptional phenomenon, one visitor puts it, which may be regarded as one of the wonders of the world. A kind of Atlantis, another marvels, an Atlantis of the jungle. Most of these European visitors focus on the city within the walls. A city paved with polished marble, one says, decorated with stone animals and gods and demons, which the visitors take to be the ancient denizens of Atlantis. Few seem to venture beyond the walls, to the great temple complex of Angkor Wat, even though this is where the action is. As the city is being reclaimed by the jungle, Angkor Wat in the 1600s is full of pilgrims from all over Cambodia, Thailand, Japan. The temple, one missionary from France writes in 1668, is renowned among 5 or 6 kingdoms, as Rome is among the Christians. Those who do visit describe Angkor Wat as a vast series of tombs, built by, well, who knows? Maybe they think Alexander the Great, the Romans, Chinese Jews, anyone it seems, but the Cambodians all around them. Let's jump ahead a couple hundred years. The Chinese emissary who visited Cambodia in the 1200s, he wrote a book about his travels called The Customs of Cambodia. And in 1819, it's translated into French, so that when Father Charles-Émile Bouleveau ends up in Cambodia in December 1850, he already knows something about the place. He had been in China doing the missionary thing when he was essentially driven out. Cambodia feels oddly familiar, even though he finds the Buddhists in the central part of the country, where Angkor is, rather hard to convert. At some point over the next 2 years, he is taken to Angkor. It is where he might expect to end up, it seems, when visiting the region. Where one goes, as he puts it, to appreciate the splendors of the ancient civilization of Cambodia. Though he too seems to have looked around and not noticed the Cambodians working and worshiping around him, saying there are few things that can stir such melancholy feelings as the sight of places that were once the scene of some glorious or pleasurable event, but which are now deserted. Father Bouleveau, too, writes a book about his travels, so that by the time Henri Mahot arrives on the scene, just a few years later, he's got to know. I mean, what are the odds after 500 years of people going and publishing about it in French that he knows nothing about Angkor? Well, Mahot would seem to know a little about a lot. Born in eastern France to a wealthy family, at 18 goes to work as a tutor in Russia and spends years traveling around there until things start to get tense in the run-up to the Crimean War. He then spends 2 years traveling around Europe with his brother, making photographs, well, daguerreotypes, before decamping to England, where the brothers marry the nieces of a Scottish explorer. They do everything together, it seems, until Maho declares he wants to go to Thailand to study the plants, and he needs the family money to do it. When he sets sail from London, he goes only with his King Charles spaniel, Tintin. How do we know Maho already knows about Angkor? Because when he gets to Cambodia, after doing what he came to do in Thailand apparently, he follows the same route to Angkor as Bouleveau took. In the journal he's keeping, he even quotes Bouleveau, acknowledging he knows, quote, nothing about architecture or archaeology. He writes about Angkor as a form of what he calls relaxation. He is a tourist, and he knows it. Which is fine. He spends very little time, actually, describing and drawing the temples he sees there. But when his journals eventually come out, published by his brother, it's enough. Europeans had seen very few images of Southeast Asia. Maho's journal is filled with them, engravings that make it appear like a tropical paradise, lost in time. A group of hunters in Laos take on a rhinoceros with lances. A troop of monkeys, hanging down from a tree like a daisy chain, tease an enormous crocodile. Maho gets a little colorful in his prose, too, describing Angkor's, quote, magnificent ruins as the work of an Eastern Michelangelo. For the French colonialists, who had already begun invading Vietnam in 1858, the same year that Maho landed in Indochina, his account is a revelation, an incentive to keep going. Especially since he seems to suggest, despite all the Cambodians around him in Angkor, literally showing him the sights, that the people who built this marvel have disappeared. What a sad contrast, he says of Angkor, to the state of barbarism in which the nation is now plunged. One cannot but ask, he asks, what has become of this powerful race, so civilized, so enlightened, the authors of these gigantic works? In fact, in 1863, a few months before Maho's journal comes out, a French expedition had made its way to the King of Cambodia at the new capital in Phnom Penh. It is no longer possible to deny, says the French admiral leading the expedition, that the pitiful Cambodia of today once nurtured and can still nurture a great nation, a nation both artistic and industrious. The king agrees to sign over his country, to become a French protectorate. And when Maho's report comes out, Angkor becomes the symbol of the French colonial project, what was and could be again. But Maho knows nothing of this. Maho had never felt entirely comfortable in Cambodia. For 2 years he didn't encounter another European. He took solace in his faith. Have you suffered, he wrote. If you have, you will appreciate the feelings with which the solitary wanderer welcomes the divine cross. You kneel down, you pray, you forget your grief, and you feel that God is with you. This is what I did. His dog helps too, curling up at his window. My little Tintin, he wrote, I much fear that my poor dog will come to an untimely end and be trampled underfoot by some elephant or devoured at a mouthful by a tiger. When Maho eventually left for Laos, he seemed more at peace. A splendid night, he wrote beside the Mekong shortly after arriving. The moon shines with extraordinary brilliancy, silvering the surface of this lovely river, bordered by high mountains, looking like a grand and gloomy rampart. The chirp of the cricket alone breaks the stillness. Here he could collect insects and snakes and flowers, which is perhaps all he wanted to do in the first place, stay out of politics. But within a few months, he comes down with a fever, malaria. 10 days later, he writes, "Have pity on me, oh my God," and is dead. It's 6 years before another French expedition comes across his grave, and Tintin, still alive with the Laotian family. By then, the rush is on. The French are established in Vietnam. Photographers, historians, artists are all making their way to Angkor. Drawings of Angkor show men on elephants tromping around the ruins. A tiger walking among the towers with their giant stone faces and the trees that have taken root among them. An evocative place, even if, as one later expedition concludes, on a spectrum somewhere between Greek architecture on the one hand and Gothic architecture on the other, though it cannot be set, quote, on a par with either. Perhaps immediately behind the great masterpieces of the West. Casts are made of sculptural fragments brought back from Angkor, shown in Paris at the Universal Exposition in 1867, like a colossus with 5 heads and 10 arms, clutching a dragon with 9 heads, and people crowd around to touch them. Drawings of Angkor are shown at the Paris Salon in 1889, and again in 1890, and eventually more pieces of Angkor find their way back to France, strapped to rafts and floated through the jungle. Heads of Brahma and Shiva, a frieze of dancers, traded apparently with the king of Cambodia for paintings and engravings and statues from Paris. Finally, in 1931, a full-scale model of a temple at Angkor Wat is built in Paris for the country's colonial exposition, combining elements of the entire complex, lit from behind with red, white, and blue lights. Here, then, are those temples which for so long seemed like visions, one observer writes. Here at the foundations, the plinths, the galleries, the extraordinary domes, resembling multi-ringed tiaras. All that is missing is the tropical forest, sprawling under the Asian sky, the pitiless sun that beats down, bringing sunstroke and death. Back in Cambodia, of course, Angkor will endure world wars and the Vietnam War and the killing fields. And the city that was never lost will only be found by more and more people. In Laos, Moho will be buried and reburied again as the jungle keeps reclaiming his tomb. Farmers will take bricks of it for their homes and ovens. The hill above will slide over it. The plate inscribed with a dedication will disappear. Over and over, the French will rebuild the monument, only to find it gone. Over the grave, even now perhaps, crawls a beetle that impressed Moho. Something he was actually the first Westerner to see. Large and black, and now named in his honor. Mahotia gloriosa. This has been the Object Podcast, made possible by Ameriprise Financial and produced by the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Come see Royal Bronzes, featuring the reclining Vishnu statue mentioned in this episode. And do get your tickets, if you haven't yet, for the next live show of the Object Podcast on October 30. I'm Tim Gihring.